Welcome to the Life Rocks podcast. In this podcast, we explore how nature, science, education, and culture can benefit all children and future generations. This is a show for educators, parents, mentors, and anyone interested in making the lives of our children, families, and communities better. So sit back, take a breath, and enjoy the show. And now for your host, Asher Cloran.
Hello and welcome to the Life Rocks podcast. I'm Asher and today I'm here with Sandi Schwartz. Sandi Schwartz is an author, journalist and mother of two. Her work has been featured in The Washington Post, National Geographic, Library Journal, Yahoo, Good Housekeeping, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Scary Mummy and more. As the founder and director of Ecohappiness Project, her mission is to inspire and educate families to build a nature habit to feel happier and calmer. Both her parenting book, Finding Ecohappiness, fun nature activities to help your kids feel happier and calmer, and her children's book, Sky's Search for Ecohappiness, are available now. I'm really stoked to have Sandi on the podcast. Welcome, Sandi. How are you today and where are you?
Great to be here. Yes, it's dinner time, which is opposite. I believe it's morning time where you are. I am in New Jersey, as we call the Jersey Shore over here, by the beach.
Amazing. Jersey's my favorite type of cow, so I assume they probably don't have anything to do with each other, but I hope they do.
Although New Jersey does get a bad rap for being a very industrial, commercialized state here in the U.S., there's actually a lot of farmland here. Not a lot of cows, but we have a lot of, I think it's the blueberry capital of the country or the world or something cool like that.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. And I actually, a couple of weeks ago and every year we come up here, I take my kids to do some blueberry picking. So this year my daughter and I did blueberry picking and raspberry picking, and they were delicious. Yeah.
Cool. You have to watch out for bears, or do they
no,
stay away from the farms?
No bears in New Jersey, no.
All right, cool. Well, tell me a little bit about how you got behind the idea that nature was a place for healing, connection, and inspiring our families and our children to a better life. Because, you've got two books. Ecohappiness is a great title, by the way. And it's true, yeah, like our relationship to the environment can build us up or it can break us down depending upon how we manage it. So how did you come to this work in your own personal way?
Yeah, so it was sort of the marriage of two big chunks of my life experience. The first is my involvement and passion for environmental protection, which started back in high school when I was involved in the Nature Defense Club back in the 90s. And we cleaned up a local polluted river. And that just really transformed my life to the fact that I wrote my college essay about that experience. I went on to college to be an environmental studies major. And, originally I was thinking of going into environmental law. And, your path kind of shifts and turns in your life. I ended up more in the environmental and science communications world. So I did a lot. That's where I kind of got into the writing piece. Nice. So that was all happening, like that track of a career. I was working in Washington, D.C. at the United States Environmental Protection Agency and environmental consulting firms, the National Academy of Sciences. And then kind of a few years later, when I was, actually I should say, on a parallel track, I was always, as a child, a stressed out kid. I have a long, genetic profile of anxious people. So it's partly, just ingrained in who I am, and then the environment. So I was, dealing with stress and anxiety, which only got worse during my path to have kids because I was dealing with lots of infertility. So that was a big stressor in my life. And then once I had my first child, which, thank goodness it all worked out, and I have two beautiful, incredible children. But I definitely had what is now considered postpartum anxiety. And so anyway, so I was going through all this stuff, right? I'm an environmentalist and then also experiencing my own stress and anxiety and what can I do about it? And, when I first brought it up to a doctor, they wanted to just write me a prescription for a pill. And I just wasn't comfortable with that. And I started doing a lot of research, and I'm totally a pro medicine person, but I thought I didn't want to jump in right away. I wanted to kind of see what other options there were. And so I really kind of discovered this world of positive psychology, things like gratitude practice, mindfulness, appreciation and awe of nature, volunteerism, and all the scientific research that shows that this boosts our mood. So one day, I was kind of writing about all these broad topics, and then I put it together into this world of eco-happiness. And part of that also stemmed from the fact that we hear a lot about eco-anxiety with climate change and plastic pollution. And I didn't want to focus on all the negative. For my own sanity, I wanted to kind of dive in and say, okay, well, let's flip the script. Instead of eco-anxiety and being depressed about the state of the environment in the world, let's look at eco-happiness. What can we do to help the planet and then also feel better at the same time? And then all of our kids need this as well. We all do, but children are really struggling.
Absolutely. Wow, that's a really great journey. And I like to hear that progression from, high school, where you're getting intrigued by environmental protection, the Environmental Defense Club. Is that what it was called?
Nature Defense Club.
Nature Defense Club, yeah. And then, you say this parallel part of your emotional life happening simultaneously of I'm a bit anxious and what do I do with it? I can really relate to that as well. Having some sort of depression or / anxiety as a teenager, and then eventually finding nature as my own point of solace in the shitstorm of culture and everything that goes on around us. I've been reading recently some theory around how our connection to the environment at different ages will change, and our needs to relate to it will change. So as a teenager, this is a time in which the social brain is much more activated, and we're trying to find a social place in nature. So this is a time when environmentalism becomes more highlighted, as where this eco-anxiety can be the pressure of having to deal with a bad environment can actually more negatively impact younger generations if it's put on them too early. Are you able to speak to this piece at all of seeing how, if we pressure little kids too early to do anything but play, and as where teenagers respond better to helping the environment?
That's interesting. I mean, I think what's so I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son, and these kids learn and absorb so much more now than what we did as kids.
Sure.
I'm 40, almost 45. So, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And so on one hand, and I actually do have a text box in my book in the volunteering chapter about how to address, scary environmental issues. Because you're right. If we want to say, hey, let's go clean up the ocean, and then they go and they see the plastic and then they get scared, so there's a lot of tips on that, kind of easing them in, keeping them away from a lot of the really, I don't know, some are horrific pictures, you see on the news, but even during a hurricane, the disaster, right, that can really drain us. And
or
so really kind of
factory farms or dolphins and whales being hunted, that kind of stuff is really
traumatizing. Yeah, I mean, even for me, I don't like to look at all that, and I know it exists. But they do learn about these issues a lot earlier than we would even imagine, in a young age. And the good news is it allows them then to come up with a lot of the science classes. They're focusing on positive solutions, and I really kind of look at my generation and feel like, what did we do wrong, and what did my parents' generation do? Why are we here? And just hoping, keeping that hope out that these young kids, because they are growing up learning, and from a again, what solutions can we use, or what from a creative standpoint, hoping that they'll come up with the solutions, because clearly we haven't.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's a balance, and I do think that clearly the science shows that by volunteering, not only from being outside and interact, just enjoying nature while you're volunteering, but also helping to make a difference, that boosts us, our mood.
Yeah.
So it's a positive impact, and that's part of the solution, instead of sitting home and crying about it. So.
Well said. Yeah, that's true. And it, I think getting involved in the community projects and doing positive change. And you mentioned positive psychology a lot in your book, and it's like, how can we reframe this negative thing and turn it into something positive or constructive that we can do? So can you describe to me the term eco-happiness and how you came up with that, and maybe, how is it connected to that sense of positive psychology? And
yeah, so, again, it was kind of like flipping the word eco-anxiety, because actually what I found is that if I was, when I first started blogging many years ago, when I started my first blog, it was like, what was it called? Savvy Science Mom, right? And I was a new parent, and so I would ask questions like about BPA in the bottles, in plastic, and different questions that were kind of scary, and it would stress me out. It actually increased my anxiety having to research these topics.
Sure.
So that's where I started to say, no, I need to focus more on positive. So I started doing the positive psychology. So that was the same kind of metamorphosis when it came to looking at the environment and its relationship to psychology and mental health, because I could sit all day and talk about that negative side and why it's so scary, that what about climate change and the pollution and on and on and on, and the policy struggles. So I said, oh, how about eco-happiness? And I did look it up, and someone had used the term, at some point on an old website, kind of like for a different reason, but I did adapt it. And I ended up just got my trademark for Ecohappiness Project. So yeah, eco-happiness is really about looking at how the environment and our connection to nature can help to benefit us from a mental health standpoint. And so then again, looking at, so what does positive psychology offer? And they had these different pockets, and I kind of expanded it a little bit because, so the topics that correlate to the chapters in my book include awe and gratitude. So awe is a really fascinating area, and it's a new area of research in the positive psychology realm. And then gratitude practice, which we hear a lot about, and there's a lot of research about that. Mindfulness, of course, is huge. I thought volunteerism was really important to have in there. And then I had, food and animals, because and it kind of interrelates, because with food, we're talking gardening. We're talking, pick your own, go to You Pick Farms, like I was talking about the blueberries. And even I did a lot of research on certain types of foods and certain, minerals that are in the foods that have calming effects on us. So we can also, alter our diet a little bit. And there's even some interesting data on pesticides and how they can trigger some mental health issues.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, awesome. That's great. There's like a full spectrum of things in your book that point us in different directions to really heal different parts of our personality, our social needs, our mental needs, our physical needs. And I like how you flipped it there, because there's so much information out there about how we're poisoning our bodies, how there's poisons in our food chain, how there's destructive habits in our households, and the destructive nature of technology. And parents are constantly dealing with this stuff. And I think it is the role of nature leaders, nature content creators, nature writers to see that darkness and turn it into something constructive that we can inspire people to make a change, not because they're doing it to try and run around and fix the world, but because it's actually just what humans have always done and what we're designed to do, what our bodies like and respond well to is actually, interacting with this birthplace of nature that fills us, it fills our cup. And I've noticed that, both you and I talk about awe, the awe of nature as this molecule or nutrient that the human spirit needs awe in our lives. I'd love for you to dive into awe and, share with our audience what is awe, how do we get it, how do we find more of it in our lives in an environment that's so totally saturated with stimulation. Some people might say, I've seen everything on YouTube, but what is awe? Why do we need it?
Well, that's actually interesting. If something doesn't give you awe, it's probably not so good for you because when we see awe, when we experience awe, it's very hard to even express and write about. It's this feeling that time, changes your perspective, is just completely transformed. It's easier to describe an example. So like looking at the stars and thinking like, well, where does the universe end and what is my place here? And, thinking about all the other planets out there and is there life out there? That is complete and utter awe because, your whole entire concept of your time and space of where you are just gets kind of questioned. So, and then if you're, at the Grand Canyon, you're just like, well, sorry, I don't know if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, but
we know about the Grand Canyon. For sure.
I remember, I was there in high school and, just that moment of standing there and looking, and it felt like I was transformed to another planet. Like, how could this be here? How was it made? I think more questions come to you than answers when you are in awe. And it doesn't just have to be nature. It could be magic, and watching a magic show and you're just wondering, how did that magician do that? Or how could that be? And where did it go? So, and sometimes you actually have physical changes. You may have tears in your eyes. You may have goosebumps or chill up your spine. You're just so enthralled and excited by something. We just had fireworks the other night, and I don't care for the loud sounds, but we were watching actually from inside, from indoors, and it was beautiful, and the whole time I'm like, how did they shoot something up and then all these colors come out, right? So I think it's about more questions than answers, but nature just is so incredible. Where did it come from? How is this made? But the awe helps. It definitely, when you are experiencing awe, there's no way you can also be experiencing anxiety at the same time.
Wow, really cool. Yeah, it's well put. And I think anyone who's been outside and gone for a walk in the woods or gone to one of these impressive landscape things like the Grand Canyon or Uluru, or seen a waterfall or looked up at the stars when it's a clear night out in the countryside, can relate to that feeling. And I like what you said there, where when you're exposed to awe, you'll find there's more questions than answers are flowing to you. And I think that questioning state is it's a good place to be in, isn't it? It's that's a creative place. That's somewhere where you're not reflecting on your past. You're not ruminating about stuff. You're just like, wow, the potential. Like, what is life?
Exactly, and that's why it's beneficial to mental the pieces you just pointed out are the two elements of what keeps us in that sticky mud of mental health issues with depression and anxiety, looking to the past, worrying about the future. So if we can be in that moment, that's what awe does for us. Same thing for gratitude. And it goes hand in hand. That's why I kind of put awe and gratitude together, because when you do experience an awe of nature, or a rainbow, Hawaii, I flew over Hawaii in a helicopter and, was, staring right at the waterfalls, in the mountain's edge. And, when you're having those experiences, then you're grateful for them, because, you're like, wow, you're grateful for nature, you're grateful for those opportunities. And that, again, the scientific research shows that when you're grateful, how can you be so depressed? Or at least it helps, improve boost your happiness, boost your mood.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And these are practices that families can start to bring to their children in small ways.
Exactly.
Could you, jump into some tips and tricks how families, and even families who live in cities or live in really suburban places, can start to find a bit more awe and gratitude in their daily, day-to-day lives?
Yes, and I talk a lot about building a nature habit, because it's just so important, because it is this natural medicine and it's everywhere. And there's no reason that we should not be, enjoying nature. It's everywhere. And it is, whether it is looking out your window, that's okay. If you can't get outside, going on the balcony, getting in your backyard, taking a walk in your neighborhood, and challenging yourself to do new and interesting things. So, a lot of people are they're post-COVID, or, this summer, it's summer where I am, it's a lot of vacation time. So, what kind of vacation are you going to take? What about an awcation? Make sure that you are incorporating not only, maybe
occasion, right?
an awcation. I didn't coin that term. I did find it in my research, but
I like it.
But when we go on vacation, we always like to include some sort of environmental nature activity. I love to choose a botanical garden to try. Over the years, of course, we've been to zoos when the kids were little. We were at an aviary one rainy day in Niagara Falls. We found an aviary, which I have never been to. It's an indoor bird sanctuary, essentially, and I saw the most beautiful birds I've ever seen. And that experience was amazing. So it doesn't have to always be outside. You can, science museums, but, really think about activities you can do, whether it's vacations or on the weekend. Think about school when your kids are choosing after school activities. What are they doing? Make sure they're choosing some activities that do connect to nature, whether it's, outdoor sports teams, a nature club, a gardening club, the scouts. So it's really just a matter of making choices and incorporating it into our daily routine. Simple things like eating dinner outside, doing homework outside.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's small things that we can do, and then there's big things that we can do. And I think having a sense that, we can create a life that includes these things, that it's just part of a regular routine, and it's not unusual to focus our lives around connecting to nature. I was a child who loved being in the museum, and the Powerhouse Museum, which was, about technology and nature and engineering and different exhibits from nature and stuff like that. And I just would spend, hours wandering through there. But other kids are much more, they love climbing trees and running through the woods. I mean, all children do at different stages. So I noticed on your website you have a quiz that helps to identify, what sort of activities, what sort of child is your child when it comes to interacting with these experiences. Can you help to define maybe a few of these child archetypes for parents and how they might relate to nature?
Yes, and I thought this was really helpful, because a lot of parents, especially those who are not really connected to environmental, issues and nature, they don't consider themselves outdoorsy, they get stuck and they say, well, what do you mean? This is work for me. How am I going to get my kids outside? They think they just say, go outside and it's going to be magic. And I said, look, start with what you love, start with what your kids love. And so to find that out, here's a little quiz. So 10 questions. And it was so fun to write. So things like what would their favorite birthday party be? Yeah. And, or how would they like to decorate their bedroom? Is it rainbows and clouds, or sports, or, animals? And so I came up with 5 different categories, and it just helps to get folks started on different activities they can do. And, I joke, I say, if you have 5 kids, you may get 5 different, type lists of activities that you can do. And, you can, every month or every week shift it up, and, everyone gets their kind of chance and to experience new things. But yeah, I had like the animal lover, the scientist, someone who might want to be involved with citizen science, and kind of like what you were talking about, so if you're into science museums, maybe also, balance that with outdoor science projects. The adventure type, the child who doesn't sit still and just wants to run around. So, get them out there, mountain biking and hiking and trying all those kind of adventure sports. Kind of the sort of the opposite of that might be the kid who loves yoga and mindfulness and sitting in the backyard and, writing poetry and contemplating life, So, nature can fit into all of us, all of our different personalities. Even in your own home, you're going to have different interests. And my husband loves golf. My son loves basketball. I love my walks are critical to my mental health and my writing process, to be able to go on walks and bike rides. So my daughter loves to sit out in the backyard and paint for hours. So, this is a tool. The quiz was an easy tool, and it's free, again, on my homepage of the website, and really every blog post you can get to it as well. And you just fill that out and you get an automatic email with a whole list of nature activity ideas for that child.
Amazing. Yeah, Sandy's a really great writer, and it's, obvious that she's been working on this material for a while. So I do recommend you go over and check out her blog and the extensive articles she's written for all sorts of different things, with some very funny titles, like it's bold outside, how to build confident teenagers, and what was the last one? The Orcation.
I just finished one last night. It was it was fun to research. It was all about how you can volunteer in parks. So your local, state, national parks. And of course, this is very US based. But it really, can help anybody get the idea of, have examples of the kinds of activities you can do at the different parks. So I cover everything from that to the benefits of tree hugging meditation and finding a sit spot, and nature photography and float therapy. Really anything that nature can help us feel calmer and happier. I love to write about. Amazing. And educate people about.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Life Rocks is not just a podcast. It is an education foundation centered around connecting children to the magic of nature through earth sciences. As a self-funded foundation and startup, we are constantly seeking support so that we can continue our great work. So if you feel called to donate to Life Rocks, please head down to the show notes and find the relevant donation link. We accept regular money as well as cryptocurrencies. We greatly appreciate you, our Life Rocks community. Now, back to the show.
So I've noticed one of your blog posts is from screen to green, and this is a big problem that modern parents, teachers, educators have to deal with when it comes to kids being glued to their screens. But it's not just kids, is it? It's our whole culture is basically hooked on handheld devices or laptops or iPhones, iPads, Xboxes, Always, everyone's got a screen, and that's how most people spend their recreational time nowadays in the modern world. So, there's so many parents that are like, oh my God, I'm really worried about this. What do we do from your perspective to help to shift from screen to green?
Yes, and I'm just as guilty, and especially with the pandemic. Yeah, I mean, look, we're on our screen now. We're using technology to communicate, but it's so cool because it's around the world. So there's pluses to it. It's kind of like everything else. It's about balance, right? That's what the experts tell us when it comes to other health issues. Diet, exercise. We have to balance, and we have to try to have self-control. So, a lot of times I think I should be listening to, for example, a podcast or even music when I go for my walks. But more often than not, especially, and this kind of pattern started with the pandemic, I just go, and I do have my phone with me, but I just don't listen to anything. I just sort of look around, and I really, really try to hear the birds and look at the pretty flowers and trees that my neighbors have. And so a lot of it is being mindful. And, with our kids, it's really hard. And again, with the pandemic, they became so much more reliant on technology, to the point where even when they're back in the classroom, they're still all on their iPads. And, books, they don't actually have real books anymore, which is good in one way because you're saving all those trees. But they're always on the screens. So, I talk a lot about the bridge, building a bridge from technology to nature for kids in a fun way. So instead of saying, you must go out and play for an hour, and then you'll get to play video games for an hour. That, and that is one possibility for people. Maybe that works. But I think it might also be interesting to, I'm a big proponent of citizen science, where are you familiar with it? Citizen science? Okay. Yeah. So I took my kids, we went near our local library we walked to. There's this a nature path.
Just for the people who aren't
aware
of citizen science, give your definition.
Yeah. So it's a way for everyday people to get involved in science data collection, or whether it's government or universities or other organizations. So things like counting the flowers that are blooming in your backyard, or the birds you see in a given time period. There's a whole bunch that are pretty popular. Of course, I have a blog post for that, and it's in my book. But so one time I took my kids, and a lot of them are done now, on apps. So we downloaded an app, and it's pretty cool. You can take a picture, you kind of zoom in on a flower or a tree, and it will tell you, the species and the background of it. And so my kids were we're so in awe and, enthralled in this exercise, because it was fun for them to be able to find out, well, is that the same kind of tree as that one? And so they got really, interested in nature. So my point is that we can build that bridge and use tools like that, like apps, the one that shows the constellations, to kind of spur their interest in nature. And then hopefully they don't rely on it all the time. Next time they say, oh, I learned that, and now I know what tree that is or what constellation that is. So that's one idea, to kind of not just rip it out of their hands, but to kind of use it as a tool to get them more interested in nature.
Nice. Yep.
Yeah. And just also the balance of, again, sports teams, when you choose after school activities, try to choose things that are going to pull them away from computers. My kids go to sleepaway camp. That's where they are right now. They are not allowed to have screens. I think they might show TV once in a while, but it's really a nature experience, and they get to, unwind from that world. And it's so important. So if you have the chance to let your kids, go to camp, and there's lots of scholarships out there, financial opportunities. It's important, especially because it's in school, they're not getting that anymore. I think there should be more outdoor classes at school. And a lot of people are fighting for that, but unfortunately in the US, we have a lot of safety concerns, and that's why these kids are in lockdown all the time. But I think they should be sitting outside, in an English class, and sometimes they do. They might have science programs where they're collecting data, but they need that more. That's for sure.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And you said a lot of good stuff in there. I saw an article that dated back to when there was pandemics going on in the early 1900s, and they found that outdoor classrooms were one of the best ways to reduce transmission of a virus from the indoor classroom. So it'd be nice to see our culture pick that up again. I think, as you say, the relationship with technology is very much about balance and also purpose. So, you say citizen science as this bridge between technology and nature, where we get to use the tools that technology's given us to have an interaction with nature that's augmented or enhanced somehow through the use of technology. And I think that's the real cool potential use for technology, is to actually deepen our connection with nature ultimately, because we're able to interact with it in these multifaceted ways. And it might be a wild food app where you're able to use a photo ID, and it can scan different plants and then identify it for you. Or it might be the constellation app where you can hold your phone up to the sky and see what constellation you're looking for. So I think that stuff's really interesting. And then when it comes to us, like you mentioned, hey, here we are on screens and we do it all the time. So, obviously our children of this world are going to follow us because we're the adults and we lead by example. Yeah. So it's important that we do creative, awesome things with technology like we are now. Like, we're using technology to have a great conversation, inspire other people, and any child observing you do your work, like your children are going to say, hey, mum, has awesome conversations with people over the internet, and she writes books and she uses her technology in a powerful way. So yeah, I think it's good to lead by example, and we can't get rid of technology. We need to learn how to integrate it in a healthy way and move our world forwards. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I also had another idea. I mean, for me, I still like an old-fashioned book. I love libraries, and I feel like with the book, that it's easier to then go outside and read, and or to say to your child, hey, take this nice, colorful book and go outside, and that way they don't have to read it on their iPad and on a screen.
Sure.
So something just simple, like going back to when things were, simpler times, doing that once in a while. Again, old fashioned barbecue, picnic, just getting to the basics and just weaving that into our routines.
Yeah. And like you said, screen free time, like sending your children away to this camp where there's no screens or devices. That's awesome. And that's going to create contrast in their lives, where they've had the experience of, oh, this is what it's like to have no screens, and it's okay, and it was fun, and we did things, and I have experiences and memories of a time without screens. And then you go back to the world, they've got something to pair it off with. I think a lot of modern kids face that issue where maybe their parents aren't into camping, they're not outdoorsy parents, they're not active parents. So these children never get to experience the other side of the fence. Raised in cities, they become teenagers in cities, their parents were born in cities, and that's just how it goes. So I notice in some of your conversations with other people and videos and podcasts and writing that I looked at yours, you say you're an urban environmentalist.
Suburban.
Suburban. Sorry, yeah,
Yes.
Suburban Environmentalist, and I like that. Can you dive into that a bit more, because I think it speaks to that quest for the modern human to find nature, and I think it also points to like you can find nature wherever you're at. So yeah, please.
Yes, it's interesting because a lot of times we struggle with thinking we're not good enough. So like, in the environmental world, I'm not an environmentalist enough. I'm not crunchy enough. I'm not outdoorsy enough, right? I don't hike. I don't go camping. I always say I've never been camping. My kids never took me. It's just not, the background.
Can't light a fire with sticks. You're useless.
Yeah, and at first I was like, oh, how am I ever going to fit into the, nature parenting author world and all that? And who am I? But the fact is that I think it is a voice that's needed because there are so many families living in the suburbs
Yep.
and the cities. But even like post-COVID, in the United States, a lot of people have left cities to go to the suburbs. So we've got the sprawl going on. And, believe it or not, there's actually, besides all the driving, there's a lot of amazing spots in the suburbs to enjoy nature. And I was also going to say, in cities as well. I mean, like every city has amazing parks and a zoo and arboretums and, science museums. It's really kind of incredible, even places that, you think just wouldn't have it, or, small towns, small cities. But, urban environments, New York City. I grew up in New Jersey, but not that close to New York. So I wasn't raised going to New York. So I didn't get to really experience New York until I was an adult. And I was just in awe, to use that term again, but of Central Park. I mean, you are literally transformed into this, green space in the middle of such an urban environment. And it's beautiful, and it's filled with animals and bikers, and it just, so, if you can find it there, you can find it anywhere. And it's just a matter of really seeking it out. And even just a little corner of grass, in a city, get a magnifying glass out, for the kids. What can they find? Is there an ant? Is there a ladybug? There's always something to explore. But yeah, being a suburbanite, I think it's important because, there's so many kids are being raised in those environments and they have to get outside more. And they have to get off these screens and they need that balance.
Yeah, it's not an excuse and it can't be, but it becomes one, but it doesn't have to be. And I think it's up to the adult to recontextualize things, to find the awe in simple nature, like a park or just even on the grass. Like it's amazing, yeah. And we can see it like that, or we could just see it as mundane, or that's just a tree, or that's just grass, or yeah.
And asking young children or really anyone questions like there's an exercise, a lot of times when you think of a tree, what color is the tree, and you just think it's brown and green. And I actually saw this like transformation of like how the basic way to draw or paint a tree, and then how you get more and more detailed in the branches and the colors and the shadows. And it's a real mindfulness exercise, to combine the mindfulness and the creativity with nature. But it's like really looking at, and sometimes I do that now because I do some watercolor painting. And so I learned that. But when I look at a tree and I look at the leaves and it's like, oh yeah, it looks like it's just green. But when you get close, you start seeing like browns and purples and orange and yellows. And that's just another trick to kind of get the kids to open their eyes and see it from a different way, see it more from a more depth.
Yeah, nice. I like that. And yeah, it's true, isn't it? Like, I think the Western mindset is very much just like arbitrary labels for everything. So like what's that, mummy? That's a tree. What's that, mummy? That's the sky. And and then the child picks up those just like arbitrary labels, and they stop using their imagination. As where a parent can start to ask those questions, ask a question from a question, like, oh, what's that? And the child's pointing at a tree, but then the parent's like, well, what do you think it is? You know, is it a home for some animals? Is it, you know, is it a place where fairies live? And it could be all of those things simultaneously. Yeah, like we only place limits on things because we want to, you know, grasp the world around us, and a certain amount of that's fine. Like, you know, learn about whatever the species is, but also, yeah, be open to other perspectives and other ways of perceiving the world, and share them with your children, because that's how to create a world full of awe.
Yeah. And all of that is a recipe for, you know, good mental health. Like when we're curious, when we want to learn more, when we're in awe, when we're, you know, just like want to get creative, or just, you know, being in the moment and having the flow, and, you know, here, paint this flower. And, you know, and then if you had, you know, 50 kids painting the same flower, they're all going to come out differently. And that's so amazing. Right. And so all of those exercises, you know, and they just help us feel better and distract us from our worries.
So if you could change one thing across the national school curriculum, what would it be, Sandy?
National school curriculum.
So something implemented in schools across the board. It's just like the national decree.
Well, there's a lot, but I'll stick to the environment.
Yeah, you can only pick one.
Yeah, I guess I would stick to more outside learning.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't make sense, and the science shows that kids who are locked away in classrooms all day, just they don't feel as well. They don't do you know, as well as far as you know, test scores.
Sure.
You know, there's like, you know, if there's plants in the room, if there's a view of the outdoors and you know, greenery, they're going to do better. So why not get them outside when they can? I would like to see, and I'm a really big proponent of shade because I've had some skin issues, and so I think that funding needs to be there. So you know, maybe they can shift instead of I once heard someone, you know, talk about the amount of money that goes into building like football stadiums at schools. And if only they took that money, or at least part of it, and they put it into like, you know, a garden that kids could enjoy together, or to me, a shaded area for classroom space. And you know, I'm not saying all day outside. I'm saying, you know, if it's one period or it's one subject, and then they rotate around. But you know, really, and making it part of the teacher's world, that's part of their goals, right? And I know right now that they have so much on their plate that they're not even thinking about that. So that would be, and to feel safe enough to do it, frankly. In the United States, so many issues with school shootings that they've got these kids so locked down that they're worried to let them out, which is pathetic. Really.
Yeah, that's a really, really big challenge that you guys face in the States. And, you know, my heart goes out to all of the families and parents and teachers and children all facing that reality right now. It's, I can't imagine what it's like.
The irony is, if those people who are so upset that are, you know, doing taking these actions, if they would just spend more time outside in nature, they probably would feel better.
No, you're 100% right. And I think, you know, I've read little bits about a lot of these characters who end up doing these awful things, and they're very lost souls who are out of touch with their society. They're out of touch with the people around them. They're out of touch with the environment around them. And they're, you know, the shooting that they're doing is is their final cry for help,
Mm-hmm.
their final cry for recognition within a mad world. And yeah, I think a simple change like that, like more time focused on building healthy body, brains, experiences, or would plug everyone into something more meaningful than just, you know, getting processed, getting an education and getting spat out the other side, just, you know, as another number or a brick in the wall, as the Pink Floyd song goes.
Yeah, and a lot of the troubled, individuals were like the outsiders at school, and so who knows? Maybe if they were, helping in a garden, that would have helped. Or uh, it just seems like it is a natural medicine. It's there, and it should be at schools with the youth mental health crisis. They need it, so why not have that intertwined into their day?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, you know, this stuff, the research is out there. It's not rocket science. People have known this for a long time. Now there's an overwhelming body of evidence that points towards nature being amazing for so many things. So when is the curriculum going to catch up? When are the schools going to catch up? Or is it now, you know, with COVID, more people are homeschooling, more parents are taking more responsibility for their child's education? Is this part of, you know, coming back in at a grassroots level of, you know, we're going to have to be the change that the world has to see?
Interesting.
How have you seen parents respond to the past 2 years in terms of, you know, taking on more of these changes, not being reliant on a schooling system for their child? What do those changes look like?
Yeah, my kids go to a school, actually a private school. So I'm not that involved in the homeschooling world. I do know that, and I'm in Florida, I do know that a lot of people left the Florida public school system. And Florida is a big state now for homeschooling. It's growing. One of my questions though with homeschooling is, that can come in so many different shapes, sizes. It can be just sticking your kid in front of a computer all day. So, because there's like online like learning through the state that you can get, your education. So I don't know. I
Yeah, it can be
honestly don't
done a lot
know.
of different ways, huh?
Yeah, so it really depends on that approach. I do know there's lots of groups now, and there's museums that offer, and parks that offer, programs for homeschooling. Um, I will say this. I feel like there's some of us who, and probably you were part of this group, went through the pandemic with that perspective of like, this is the time for the world to change. This is when people are going to change, because there's certain of us who just are like that, introspective and progressive and wanting to change. But on a day-to-day basis, what I see is people just wanted to go back to their lives the way they were. And I don't see that they really changed that much. That's like, looking back generally. When I hone in on like, some of the people already involved in these kinds of movements, like the environmental movements and stuff, we all were like, oh, this is the chance, like it's COVID, it's lockdown. Oh my gosh, the air is cleaner and this cars are off the road. This is a blessing. But most, at least Americans, they just wanted to go back to their parties and their lives. So I don't know how many lessons were learned and changes were made overall, but certainly in pockets.
I'd say that's a very realistic opinion, and I'd have to say the same. I think there seems to be people that are proactive in life and tend to frame things in the positive and move forwards no matter the weather. Rain, hail, or shine, they're going to, pick themselves up and get to work. And then I think generally most people are, they just want life to be easy and go along and get things happening, for their own world. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when we have a system that doesn't really point people in the right direction, you can see that not ending up in the best places. So yeah, I guess it is just for people who are positively inclined to make a difference in the world and get behind the positive things, to use this bit of extra momentum as a push to really start to bring our messages further and further and become that bridge between the mainstream awareness and like some of these practices that we're talking about here today. Sandy, what's next? Oh, did you want to comment there?
Oh, I was just gonna say that, yeah, maybe once a change maker, always a change maker. And I don't know how many people, go through that major process in their lives, but we definitely hear stories that there are people that something dramatic happened and it completely altered their lives, and now they're doing X, Y, or Z. So I think it's out there. It's just like when you take that step back, it's like, okay, where was this big change I wanted to see? But you got to look for it in certain places, for sure.
Yeah, be optimistic and then realistic simultaneously. Set the bar high and also accept when it comes in under the moonshot.
Oh, and I also was going to say, there has been a lot of progress when we do step back, even just in the environmental world. The plastics are being banned, or companies are always trying to be innovative and change. Even McDonald's, right? They got rid of styrofoam. Like it's slow moving, but things are happening. Electric vehicles. My master's thesis was on alternative vehicles, electric vehicles, and now. Look at all the companies that are making them and marketing them. So it's a little bit slower than a lot of us would hope, but there are lots of examples of that change, and hopefully that will come as well when it involving connection to nature and schools and otherwise.
Yeah, cool. I find that interesting. You mentioned the thesis on electric vehicles. I've been thinking lately how long is the transitionary technology, and is that mapped out by industry? Because say you take a Tesla and it takes 100,000 ton of ore to get specific rare earth metals from there to run the batteries. So like right now, it still takes so much fossil fuel and takes so much energy to produce a Tesla, well and above that of a petrol car. But so it's a transitionary technology, and is there some sort of awareness in that industry of the length of time or the stage progression to it actually becoming cleaner? I'm just interested whether you know some stuff there.
I do not. That is very interesting. I don't know what the future is, and I don't know that I've ever seen a huge assessment of like the exact climate carbon footprint on the whole entire process. I don't know. I mean, we also have solar panels, and there's lots of these. There's a lot of questions. I think we need a lot of scientists in the next generation to answer a lot of our questions.
Yeah, absolutely we do. I think the realm of science is ever going to be fascinating, and oftentimes technology takes this kind of like destructive initial explosion, and then we begin to like refine it and make it better and make it healthier and that sort of thing. I recently was reading just yesterday about a 500 terabyte 1 centimeter diamond silica crystal grown in a lab. So imagine, and this thing can be stored. It's pretty much indestructible. So you've got 500 terabytes on something this big, and what that's going to do to revolutionize data that we pay so much money for nowadays. It's just insane. This sort of exponential curve of technology we're on. So what's next for you, Sandy, in your work, and let people know also where they could find you, and where they can buy your books.
Yeah, sure. So, the topic that I wrote on, the intersection of nature, mental health, really is an evergreen topic that will, be needed, I think, for many years to come. So, as far as my future, I'm going to continue to work on spreading the word about it, and with these kinds of, discussions, and then also trying to get back to a lot more writing, because that's really where my heart and passion is in the process of writing, and writing more about these topics, and coming up, with sharing new ideas and experiences involving that connection that people can have, and make it easier for folks of all ages. And it is a parenting book, but I really do think it applies to all of us. So, everything in here really is for everybody. And so the best thing to do to learn more would be to go to my website, ecohappinessproject.com. There's blog posts and articles and interviews, videos and podcasts, and also the link to where you can grab both books, the parenting book and the children's book. But of course, they're on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and wherever books are sold, even Walmart, everywhere online. And what's even great, they're in a lot of libraries. So if you go to your library and the books aren't there, request them, because the library would be happy to order them for you. And that would also, I would love that to spread the word.
Awesome. Absolutely. And would you mind telling us a little bit about the child's book, and what maybe the story, just an outline of the story is for that?
Yes. So I thought it was really important to bring this concept to life in a very, simple way for young children. And so it's about a little girl named Sky, and all the characters have nature-related names, which is fun. And I co-authored this with Julie Neustatter, who is a teacher. So she had the experience and really kind of brought my vision to life with the story. And so the little girl, Sky, is feeling a little blue, and her mother suggests that she go outside and see what her friends are doing. And they're lucky enough, they live by the beach. And so she gets to walk up the beach and see her friends doing all these wonderful, calming nature activities, like painting a sunset, doing beach yoga, and even doing a beach cleanup, which I thought was really, important to have in there. So she, and playing with someone's dog, that a friend that's walking a dog. And so she really discovers what eco-happiness is during this day, and adventure out with her friends. And so it really was a way to spur that conversation with young children, to talk about their emotions and what they can do, to connect to nature when they are feeling a little bit down or anxious.
Amazing. Sounds really beautiful.
Yeah, it was a fun project.
Well, Sandy, it's been awesome to catch up, and I hope that we get to touch base again in the future. And yeah, please let us know if you've got any other major projects coming up, or you want to come back on and talk about them. I'd love to have you on the Life Rocks podcast. And yeah, really grateful for you coming today. So thank you.
Well, thank you for doing this, and congratulations on the launch of your podcast.
Thank you very much. Life Rocks listeners, this has been the Life Rocks podcast. And until next time, enjoy yourselves. Life rocks.
Thank you so much for listening to the Life Rocks podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then leave us a review. We'll be back soon with more inspiring content, and in the meantime, remember, life rocks.